you said in your introduction, tax on what were supposedly insured depositors. And that got everybody just wild. And then you've had this chaos for the last week. The banks closed, queues outside cash machines, confidence destroyed. And the result is that it's not just a week of chaos, because this is an economy that is relying very largely on finance. And if you lose trust in a financial system, you've lost a big part of that financial system.
What about the way this has been handled in Brussels and the role that Germany has played in this? Because clearly those on the street in Cyprus are saying, why are we being treated differently?
Well, there are two reasons why they're being treated differently. One is that we are quite close to the German elections. And Angela Merkel, you know, in the autumn, she faces re-election, and the Germans have had it up to here in how much they're prepared to bail people out, but frankly, that's the fault of the Cypriots also, because as I said, if they'd addressed this last year, it wouldn't have been right bang against the German elections. The other reason why the Cypriots are being treated particularly harshly is because they're small enough to bully around. The Greeks were fairly small, but everybody realised that if the Greeks really left the euro, that would be quite difficult to stabilise the ship. Whereas with Cyprus, they've taken the view that if they put a bullet in Cyprus's head, the rest of the Eurozone will manage to hobble along and it won't be too bad.
OK, well, we'll see what happens in the coming hours. Hugo, thanks very much indeed for coming in.
Pleasure.
You're watching BBC News. Time for our headlines at just after 7:45. Heavy snow and high winds are causing widespread disruption across much of the UK. Thousands of houses remain without power and roads in some areas are impassable. Politicians in Cyprus are holding last-minute negotiations over an international bailout aimed at avoiding financial ruin. And Lancashire Council finds horse meat from Hungary labelled as beef. It's thought 40 kilograms has been sold to the public in Liverpool and in Preston. And coming up in the next few minutes, we'll hear how West Ham have signed a 99-year lease to become tenants of the Olympic Stadium. And on the financial markets, a look at those market numbers for you. A rise at the FTSE 100, ending up. Shares still trading in the United States, and that's how the Dow and the Nasdaq are faring just now. 4 out of 5 patients in England would not feel safe relying on the NHS out-of-hours service for an urgent medical problem. That's the warning from the Patients Association. It says some people are struggling to get access to a GP during normal hours, and it wants a review of the system, which it describes as complex and convoluted. Well, one person who feels let down by the out-of-hours care system is Susie Granholm. Her husband died of cancer last year and chose to spend his final months at home. And she's been speaking about the difficulties that she had in getting him the emergency care that he needed.
Well, I remember clearly the first time ringing. It was about 10 or 11 at night, and someone answered the phone, and I said, I need a doctor. I need someone to come and give my husband an injection. He's a palliative care patient, and you know that because my GP's told you that. And she said, well, they're very busy, and we may be able to get you a doctor by about 4 or 5 in the morning. Now that situation was completely unacceptable, and the pain got worse and worse, and I had no option but to ring a private nursing agency who shot out of bed, the wonderful nurse, and came and gave him the morphine shot. It was a very tricky situation.
From your experiences of out-of-hours care, what do you think of it? Do you think it should carry on in the same way it is, or what kind of improvements need to be made?
Well, I can only speak from my own experience. I rang them 4 times in all. I think we need to have some sort of rapid response team for terminally ill patients in situations like that. You can't, in today's world, leave somebody yelling in agony for pain relief, and what on earth do you do? We were told by the hospice specifically not to ring for an ambulance. Ambulance staff don't carry morphine, and they wouldn't know where to start with him anyway, as he'd had so many operations, and it was it wasn't a straightforward situation. And I was stuck, basically, and I had no option but to try and get hold of a private nurse, which I did.
What do you think needs to improve in out-of-hours care now? Is it that they need better staff, more staff?
I wouldn't know because I never saw anybody. I never once saw a doctor. Nobody turned up. It was a case that they were referring the calls onto the district nurses. District nurses came, but you can't actually get someone in time. It's hours and hours. It's a very lengthy wait. There are thousands of people probably in this situation. So other than trying to get a rapid response team specifically for these sort of situations, as 1 in 3 people are going to get cancer, and the NHS doesn't want people to die in hospital in order to free the beds up, then they have to put something in place to help people like us in that situation.
How much of a difference would it have made to your husband towards the end of his life if the out-of-hours care had been to a standard that it should have been?
It would have been an enormous difference. It would have saved him having to lay for hours in, intractable pain, and it would have, the stress on myself and the stress of everyone around and his sister and people that were helping me was enormous. And I think it's a terrible thing to be let down so badly at the end of your life, because you don't get another chance. It's the end. And it's totally unnecessary. And it is a problem. It's a major problem.
Susie Granholm, who feels let down by the out-of-hours care system. Now, a line of breaking news for you coming out of Northern Ireland. This is weather-related. We're now being told that all electricity in Belfast is off. Now, Northern Ireland Electricity has confirmed that a fault apparently has led to a complete blackout. If you were watching throughout the day, you'll be aware that they were already dealing with 40,000 plus, I think 48,000 was the figure I saw, customers without supply because of the weather. But we're now talking about the whole of the city of Belfast being without electricity. We'll obviously keep tabs on that throughout the evening and bring you any further updates that we can here on BBC News. The Olympic Stadium was the setting for some of the most memorable moments last year, and now a decision has finally been made on its future. The scene of summer's British athletics success will become home to West Ham Football Club. The club has signed a 99-year lease to become the stadium's main tenant. Here's our sports editor, David Bond.
For more than a century, Upton Park has been West Ham's home. But while their new ground is only around the corner, their move to the Olympic Stadium has felt like an awfully long road to travel. Today, relief for the Premier League club as they were finally able to show off their vision for the future. This is what the Olympic Stadium will look like after West Ham move in 2016. But transforming the venue won't come cheap. The Mayor of London insists the deal will generate millions of pounds each year and safeguard the legacy of the park. But I asked him why it had become such an expensive problem to fix.
You've got to face the reality that they took a decision back in 2006, David, not to build that wonderful stadium to be compatible with football at first go. And so it was always inevitable after that decision was taken that post-Olympics we were going to have to spend more money, more dosh on the refurbishment, on getting the sightlines right and all that.
Moving West Ham in here has proved a long and tortuous process. And although today's deal brings an end to one of the big legacy questions out of London 2012, the total cost for the stadium is now almost £600 million. And the vast majority of that is being picked up by us, the taxpayer. So what is the plan? Retractable seats will be installed to bring football fans closer to the action. The roof, which only covered 2/3 of the stadium in Olympic mode, will be extended to cover those new seats. The total cost of the project could be as much as £190 million, including an extra £25 million from the Treasury. Critics say all that could have been avoided if the lessons of past hosts like Sydney had been learned. Organisers in London prioritised athletics, while the Australians ripped up their running track after the 2000 Olympics.
There was never going to be a consideration that athletics was going to keep this place alive and well moving forward, and we certainly had to put meaningful content in here on a week-to-week basis. I can only imagine that something like the Olympic Stadium and the other major facilities in London are in exactly the same position.
London 2012 turned this stadium into a national treasure, but this place can't run on memories, and while some will say West Ham have got it on the cheap, There was really no other alternative. David Bond, BBC News.
You're watching BBC News, and coming up in the next few minutes. As winter refuses to make way for spring, we'll look at how blizzards and heavy rain have caused disruption across the UK. Another day, another horse meat discovery. We'll have more on the mislabelled products found by Lancashire Council. And how the decision to go to war in the Falklands split the cabinet. We'll have the story behind Lady Thatcher's private papers. Time for a look at that all-important weather now with Peter Gibbs.